See all of his stuff on television, but when I do see him, someone I enjoy watching is Derren Brown. And what I particularly like about him is the way in which he exploits the way people see things, the way in which we see the world. He'll take volunteers or victims, I suppose you could call them, or a whole audience, and a television audience as well. And we all expect something to be there or to happen, and therefore we don't notice what's really happening or what's really there, and Derren Brown exploits this. And it really doesn't matter how often he explains what he's doing, and it's all there in his book, Tricks of the Mind. We still fall for it, and we fail to see what's going on. And while I'm not a particular fan of stage magicians, I do once remember as a child having to sit down and watch a friend's much older brother put on his magic show. And the rest of the performance was rubbish. And I and his younger brothers enjoyed tremendously taking the mickey out of him, but he did that trick with the 3 upturned cups and the ball. And the rest of his show, as I say, was rubbish. But his trick, this trick, was impossible to work out. You couldn't guess where the ball was because all of the cups looked the same and he was moving them around and we were trying to keep our eye on which cup was which. But there was no telling what, if anything, was under any of them. And it was brilliant, and I like that kind of trick, I still do, where you know that something's going on, but it's impossible to see what's happening, and yet it's right in front of you. This, of course, is what the magician wants you to do. Keep staring at the cups or the cards or the hands, and you are oblivious to what is really happening right in front of your eyes. Really, really difficult, though, is when all of this is happening and you can't actually see any of it. And this process is going on all of the time because it's happening to language. We're hugely skilled in the art of working out what someone is saying when it doesn't really make any sense or is contradictory. And I can remember in the days of bus conductors on buses hearing a conductor say this on more than one occasion, "Come on, get off." Now imagine that you were trying to learn English and you came across that. I can remember in primary school, after a bit of an animated playground discussion which got out of hand, our primary 4 or primary 5 teacher was trying to work out what had happened before school recommenced in the afternoon. And one of my school friends opened his defence with, "I never hit no one, miss." And apart from the fact that it was untrue, what he actually said is the opposite of what he meant. But you and I know immediately what he meant. And that is because we're right here in the culture in which it makes sense. We know the code, we can do the translation without even thinking. And the real meaning of language shifts like the coin under the cups. The words remain the same, but we keep our mind on the meaning, not the sound of the words, and the meaning shifts and moves. The word gay is the perfect example. In my childhood, my granny would happily have described a shirt that I was wearing as gay, and it would have meant bright and cheery. But now the word has come to mean something completely different. And for a wee while there was a bit of confusion, because we were in a transition period. To parents and grandparents, the word meant one thing, and to the next generation it meant something different. And that brings us to today's reading, and we're going to hear it in a second or two. But in that reading, and listen out for it when you hear it, is a reference to salt. Salt was a hugely valuable commodity in the ancient Near East. It was sometimes used as currency, and it was cut like modern-day heroin or cocaine with cheaper substances. And that's what Matthew's Gospel is getting at in our reading. And Matthew's Gospel is the most Jewish of all the four Gospels, but nevertheless don't be misled by words such as commandment or righteousness or law. This is all referring to the Old Testament, but Matthew's Gospel has Jesus preaching on a hillside. He is the new Moses, not the old one. And if gay can change its meaning completely in a generation, words like commandment, righteousness, and law had new meaning by the time Matthew's Gospel came into being. All of these words refer now to Jesus' teaching. I want us just to take a quick look at this video clip, news footage from the Scottish Parliament. And then, because it links in not only with what we're doing now, but what we did last week with the Beatitudes, I want us to take a quick look before we come back to this at something that Carl Sagan said and wrote and is reading here, because it gives us a sense of perspective and insight, and as he says, perhaps humility. History-changing legislation and decision-making from the Scottish Parliament, which has Scotland and perhaps some of the wider world up in arms, and then a sense of perspective.
The result of the vote on motion number 8915 in the name of Alec Neil is as follows. Yes, 105. No, 18. There were no abstentions. And the Marriage and Civil Partnership Scotland Bill is passed.
In the 17th century, there was still some hope that, even if the Earth was not the center of the universe, it might be the only world. But Galileo's telescope revealed that, quote, "the moon certainly does not possess a smooth and polished surface," close quote, and that other worlds might look just like the face of the Earth itself. The moon and the planets showed unmistakably that they had as much claim to being worlds as the Earth does, with mountains, craters, atmospheres, polar ice caps, clouds, and, in the case of Saturn, a dazzling, unheard-of set of circumferential rings. After millennia of philosophical debate, the issue was settled decisively in favor of what was called the plurality of worlds. They might be profoundly different from our planet. None of them might be as congenial for life, but the Earth was hardly the only one. This was the next in the series of great demotions, downlifting experiences, demonstrations of our apparent insignificance, wounds that science has, in its search for Galileo's facts, delivered to human pride. Well, some hoped, even if the Earth isn't at the center of the universe, the Sun is. The Sun is our Sun. So the Earth is approximately at the center of the universe. Perhaps some of our pride could in this way be salvaged. But by the 19th century, observational astronomy had made it clear that the Sun is but one lonely star in a great self-gravitating assemblage of suns called the Milky Way galaxy. Far from being at the center of the galaxy, our Sun, with its entourage of dim and tiny planets, lies in an undistinguished sector of an obscure spiral arm. We are 30,000 light years from the center. Well, our Milky Way is the only galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is in fact one of billions, perhaps hundreds of billions, of galaxies notable neither in mass, nor in brightness, nor in how its stars are configured and arrayed. Some modern deep sky photographs show more galaxies beyond the Milky Way than stars within the Milky Way. Every one of them is an island universe, containing perhaps 100 billion suns. Such an image is a profound sermon on humility.
Words and ideas change. This week you have seen an historic vote on marriage which will be echoed throughout the world and will become as normal as the once radical idea of gender equality in the workplace is normal now. They're talking about marriage, but it is marriage as a contract. It's not about lesbian or gay people, it's about equality. You have to look at the real meaning and significance of what is going on. And I'm not talking about same-sex marriage. But there will be sermons all over Scotland today using today's reading as a sledgehammer to argue against same-sex marriage. But you know, these preachers and these sermons and these churches have misunderstood what Matthew's Gospel is saying. To understand what's going on, you have to start at the very end of our reading today, where Jesus says, "For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven." The scribes knew the legal stuff, and the Pharisees knew all about ritual purity, righteousness. And some clever and informed person is going to tell me that by the time Matthew's Gospel was written, Judaism as Jesus knew it wasn't in existence because the temple had been destroyed. And you'd be right, exactly. But the point is, Judaism was rebuilding itself as rabbinic Judaism, and Christianity was building itself, and the new Judaism was all about righteousness. It was going back to a different kind of route. The new Judaism was the Pharisees' view. So Matthew's Gospel in context is saying to the church, the new church, you have to make sure that you really understand the new teaching that you have. Matthew's Jesus appeals to the law and its commandments, not just the 10 commandments. The law is far bigger than that, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and effectively more. But you have new teaching, because Jesus is the new Moses, and there is a new law. Jesus as the new Moses is teaching that the real understanding of the intention behind the law is what is there in what his method. And that's what Matthew is telling us. Jesus' teaching takes you to the heart of what the law is about. That's what it's saying. So Matthew is telling us, don't cut or dilute the salt. The salt is Jesus' teaching, which is never about getting to God or the truth through obedience to law. The key is love and letting go and selflessness. And I think that the many who today will be thinking that this reading has just dropped out of heaven as a gift from God to preach against the evils of same-sex marriage will have completely missed the point of what Matthew's Gospel is saying, because it's saying the opposite of what you think. This is a call back to Jesus' message of repentance, seeing the bigger picture of letting go of self and seeing the whole picture, the Beatitudes. Jesus, who mixed with sinners and touched the sick, women, those who were bleeding, who told stories in which the only way to do right was to disregard the law and break the commandments. I'm thinking of the Good Samaritan, the 10 lepers, the Pharisee and the tax collector, the woman who was bleeding, the woman caught in adultery. We could go on and on. This Jesus didn't demand that anyone go to the Old Testament and take it literally or use it to hurt others. The language in Matthew 5 and the terms used in the Old Testament are here in Matthew's Gospel. But just as gay meant something very precise to my granny and means something different but equally precise to my children, so is Matthew using commandment, law, righteousness here in a way which has meaning only in the context of early Christian teaching. And the ministers and churches which are using this today, and I know they are, I see the websites and what they're saying on social media, are actually using material which is the very opposite of what they think it is. Righteousness here refers to teaching which is about love and welcome and inclusion and the breaking down of barriers. Uncompromised and undiluted salt refers to undiluted selflessness, unselfishness, commitment to the God who gives, loves, accepts and welcomes, and about whom Jesus spoke when he said this, and Matthew has it in the same chapter as we are reading now. God makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteousness and the unrighteous. In other words, in Jesus' teaching there are no divisions, there are only people. There is no righteous or unrighteous, righteousness or unrighteousness, because righteousness here refers to love and compassion and selfless letting go, to the bigger picture which includes your neighbour and opens up an understanding of God. Once we embrace what righteousness means here, then we understand that there is no us and them, no better or worse, but simply one, unity.